Okay, everyone, as promised, we've taken things up a notch today with our discussion on edge computing and its frictionless, high performance, low latency experience for applications in cloud environments. We made the climb, but now it's time for a deep dive. And our first group of experts tackle the topic of just how industry players are supporting emerging digital applications as compute capabilities are deployed closer to end users. Joining us for a closer look at the underbelly of edge computing are JP Savage, National Director, Network Practice at Bell Canada, Rodney Elder, Global Principal at Equinix, and Greg Spear, Director, Solutions Enablement at Accedian. JP, Rodney, Greg, a big welcome to all of you and a big thank you for being a part of the MEF Infinite Edge series and for being a part of today's deep dive. So let's start off with introductions. If you'd be so kind, share a little bit about yourself and your role within your organization. Let's go JP, Greg, then Rodney, please. JP, take it away.
So JP Savage, so I'm part of Bell Canada, and I do look after our networking practice. So I look after the network portfolio for Bell.
I'm Greg Spear. I'm a Director of Global Strategies and Solutions at Accedian, and my work involves a knowledge transfer, making sure folks know what's going on in the industry, and also working on the solutions with our customers to make sure the right solution is delivered.
Hi, Jeff. Rod Elder. I'm a Global Principal at Equinix. That means I'm in the Solutions Architecture team. But additionally, one of the things I'm working with is the Evolving Edge team at Equinix, and we're focused on all things that are edge-related from a physical perspective, as well as 5G and edge-oriented compute things.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, JP, let's start off with you here. So why do we need MEC, and in what cases is it useful to move applications closer to the customer?
Jeff, thanks for the question. So from my point of view, I do believe that MEC demand is triggered by new customer experience like AR, VR, gaming, connected cars, and maybe some other enterprise use cases like smart manufacturing and healthcare. And these new experiences are pretty data rich, and they do require some great responsiveness. So And I think in many cases, the existing architecture don't really provide the latency required to provide the right experience. And so having MEC site that is closer to the end user, that can host the application, it's actually kind of a solution to provide the right performance. So for users on sites that are located far away from the application host site, either the cloud site or the private data centers, latency can really be a deal breaker. So the MEC is going to be particularly useful, for those remote area. So when we think about the 5G, I heard my peers, talk about 5G here. So the 5G use cases being developed, and bringing new services in the market, I think there will be great benefit of keeping the data local to a region. So if I look at my own country in Canada, it's a pretty large, country, and there's going to be great benefit to keep the data local, and that will positively impact the performance of the environment. And lastly, so we typically, associate MEC to 5G, but I do believe there's a number of non-mobile use cases that organization will definitely see benefit, from MEC.
Great. So do you believe that MEC opens the door for new use cases or really improves or addresses existing ones?
Actually, good question. I think it's actually going to be both. So both new use cases and existing, application that you can improve using MEC. Actually, I think we're going to, probably the first use cases that we're going to see is going to be improving existing application, where the organization do have some limitation with the existing deployment or some challenges with the existing support model. I do believe the existing application are probably the low-hanging fruit for a lot of the organization. And that will probably trigger the need for what I would define the public MEC. So really the partnership between the hyperscalers and the service providers. And that will also provide an easy transition to cloud for existing application. And that, MEC solution will definitely, improve performance for the end user. The proof of value is going to be easier to do as well for the organization. There's going to be less investment, and TCO probably easier to build overall. And other benefit is if there's a revenue stream associated to the application, the organization will be able to secure that and make it even better for the end user. So for the new use cases, especially the one around 5G and MEC, there would be for sure more investment and more time spent, to put them in market, a bit more risk. So some of them also have dependency on technology availability or 5G spectrum availability. So there might be a bit of delay associated to those. But don't get me wrong, use cases are very interesting. There's a lot of talks in the market around those. So and they do represent new revenue stream for the organization. So quite appealing, brand new categories in many cases, and some of them will generate actually efficiency and cost reduction for the organization. So in short, I think both existing use case and new use case are as important.
Got it. Thank you so much, JP.
I think
all right, Greg, coming to you now.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. What
please.
JP was talking about is the language that we're seeing today when it comes to MEC and 5G and so forth. We hear the word use case before anything else. So it's really about the user, the use case, and then the technology, as opposed to how it was in the past. Just want to add that in. Thanks.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So Greg, why will traditional human interpretation of PM data not work for the next generation networks?
Well, I've worked in telecom for many years. I started when it was X25 and so forth, and the amount of, and for listening to JP, the amount of services, the amount of slices, the MEC, so having things closer to the edge, so there's more compute, there's more things to look at, and having a human trying to manage all this information. So an end user experience, right? You're using your application, you're having a good time or whatever, goes slow. If something starts to not go well, there's so many components involved in your user experience today that it's very difficult for humans to be able to react and manage quickly. So that's where I think the efficiency of monitoring these new and next generation or even current generation networks requires automation to be in the back of our minds as we're building things, because we need machines that are going to be able to go back and take a look at this and say, this is where our area of problem, this is where we need to invest resources, this is where we need to add compute, instead of trying to have a room full of people trying to figure this out. We still need the people.
You mentioned applications. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
You mentioned applications. Many applications assume L2 and L3 connectivity is reliable. How can we close that gap there?
And that's where it comes down to, I don't want to get too, in the weeds or whatever, but it comes down to having instrumentation that is deployable in today's network, right? When we think of the guy showing up with his big boots and a test set, we can't do that anymore. We have to have agile. We have to have, agents, software agents that can be deployed by orchestrators that can instrument networks automatically. So that's where the application level, my server response time, my user experience, the component of the network also needs to be validated as we're looking at that as well.
Rodney, headed over to you now. Can you give us an example of a cloud-native multi-domain orchestration PaaS solution?
Yeah, actually here at Equinix, we're experiencing a couple of them, and they range because they have different focal areas. And one of the other things I wanted to bring up, and actually wanted to pick up on a couple of things that Greg and JP talked about, right, around MEC and around the ability to look at this, the PM data, and where do you do these multi-domain orchestration platforms? And at Equinix, with our metal, at our Metro Edge, something we call the Metro Edge, wherever we've got our IBXs, we're finding that a lot of innovative organizations, maybe historically full stack software companies that would sell software as a license are moving to as a service or a platform as a service. And doing that at Equinix on Equinix Metal actually helps enable some of these other things like Greg was talking about, PM management, be able to make decisions about where to steer traffic from an SD-WAN over to a private connectivity. Really getting into like the MEC use case where JP just talked about 5G. MEC, we always talk about MEC with 5G, but the reality of it is that MEC, from our perspective on a metro edge point of view, has wide applicability. In the restaurant industry, the fact that they're now faced with doing all these point of sale terminal things, that they want to add new things like maybe AI, maybe machine learning, but more importantly, they just want to do more apps so they can send their restaurant people out to the parking lot to take orders and to do new innovative things in this time that we live in.
Great. So where should a multi-domain orchestration platform be implemented?
Well, I'm biased, but at Equinix, the thing that we're talking about in the market is so, and this has some reality to it. When we talk about doing multiple domains, whether the domain is at the infrastructure layer, whether it's Kubernetes or Docker or VM or Red Hat or OpenShift, right? Or whether it's at the application layer or the network layer, the question becomes is, can we do this in a place that has immediate low latency access to all of those things with lots of agile connectivity methodologies so that if we have to pivot, we can? So what we're seeing at Equinix is that these orchestration platforms are well suited to go into a metro edge location, that it can take advantage of the emerging micro edge sites that are being deployed to support 5G or MEC, but also have that dedicated private connectivity up to whatever hyperscale clouds that they need to gain access to, because we know customers are deploying their infrastructure across multiple clouds.
Great. Thanks, Rodney. So Greg, back to you now. What should we do when an SLA is violated? How do you address this?
Yeah, and that comes down to, once again, the ability to instrument, the precision of the instrumentation, and being able to get that data rapidly. An example is like a POC we did at one of the MEF events with a few providers, and basically an SLA was violated. So there was 3 operators, right? We could have like Bell and Tata and Tim Brazil that are delivering a service across the world for a user, a customer. And then there's a violation of the SLA. Now, which company was responsible for the violation, how the credits get sorted out, and how the penalties get sorted out, that's the type of scenario where automation is, where we prove that in the POC, can be used to determine this is when the SLA violation started, this is when it stopped, and then feed that into the settlement software, whatever, and it gets sent out. We're also seeing a lot of scenarios today where SLA violations are reported to orchestrators, and orchestrators are then used to either reroute or provide the SLA violation report to the operator or so forth. So once again, being able to react to that SLA violation live and what needs to be done to correct the situation, as opposed to having a report 30 days later that said your SLA was violated on Tuesday afternoon.
Got it. So do you think we should just monitor the end user experience? Do you think that's really all that matters?
And that's what it comes down to, because when we talk to our customers, and I'm sure JP or Rod, when they talk with people, it really comes down to the end user. When it comes to my network was doing great, my databases are in fine shape, it's all not that relevant. So what we're seeing more and more is the key performance indicator is the end user response time, the user experience. So we're taking multiple performance indicators, whether they're related to network, page load times, combining them and arriving to our customers with, here is your end user experience. And
Greg, we talk about end user experience a lot, and it certainly is clearly important because that's what everyone's managing to. But what about the places where it's a machine user experience, where that end device is just a machine, and you need to react to that too?
Yeah, the machine's the user, and I totally agree with you. So a robot's a user. My phone could be a user, right? The weather station in JP's backyard could be a user experience. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe I got to expand the word user. You're right there, Rod.
Yeah. All right, so Rodney, how does interconnection impact multi-domain orchestration for cloud-native apps? apps?
Interconnection is paramount for multi-domain orchestration. When we talk about cloud native apps, let's talk about it in the context of the mobile operators, right? So as the mobile operators move from a non-standalone configuration to standalone configuration to support millimeter wave deployments and high density 5G deployments in metropolitan areas, one of the things that they're really going to have to pay attention to is latency. And in order to architect this so that end-to-end applications function, the thing that needs to then happen is what sort of orchestration tools, what multi-domain orchestration tools, are we sure that a Kubernetes light configuration out in a MEC is actively got the right latency interconnect to the Kubernetes cluster that runs in, say, IBM Cloud? And that's some of the things that we're doing at Equinix to prove out that doing the domain orchestration at Equinix gives you that east-west or north-south sort of vantage point, whichever way you want to look at it. So we really feel as though that latency certainly matters, and latency always comes down to interconnectivity and your ability to agilely change that on as needed.
Great. So can bare metal be orchestrated alongside other cloud offerings?
Yeah, in fact, that's the whole thing when we at Equinix acquired Packet and turned it into Equinix Metal. We at Equinix plan to stay on stack. We're focused on continuing to automate that bare metal. We're really wanting to make sure that we build an ecosystem that anyone who's got a domain orchestration solution, whether it's multi-domain or not, right? The point is that you can take different orchestration elements, run them on Metal, obtain your end goal, which is multi-domain orchestration, and not necessarily have it on the same infrastructure that's running your production applications or your production systems.
Great, thank you. JP, back to you now. Where will existing workloads moving to MEC come from?
I do believe that they will come from different places. So the first that comes to mind is the customer premise. So actually, a few workloads actually running on customer premise. I think about video surveillance, and we have a number of customers that run, servers and storage, in a closet somewhere, and it's a bit of a nightmare to manage, right? So if they can move some of those applications to a 10, 15, 20 MEC site to cover their geography, I think that's going to be definitely a lot simpler to manage and most likely reduce cost, overall. So when I look at some other application like gaming or connected manufacturing, right, a lot of the compute, is local to the user or to the players, right? So that's probably the first category. The second category is the workload that are sitting in the public cloud or private cloud today, right? So some of these workload, I think about some business application that do require so low latency that we're trying to we're doing workaround right now to provide the right latency. So I think MEC would be a good alternative for some of those. I think about IoT app as well that that might be moving from public and private cloud to the MEC side. I think the third category is probably the brand new workload, the one that we need to find a home for, like the connected car and AR, VR that are not really anywhere today. And so I think MEC is going to be the place to deploy these applications. So obviously MEC is not going to be the place for everything, and I think MEC is going to be a good alternative, to the other solution. It's going to be really complementary to the existing private and public cloud.
And just to tag on to that, JP, I've experienced some customers who maybe were doing their initial development of an app, and they did it, in the cloud, but the ultimate location for it winds up being MEC, where the development happens up in the cloud because it was fast, it was easy, and then they need to make that migration out as they deploy. So if they got a business process that needs to be deployed, but they're going to do it on a regional basis, either global regional or in-country regional, they start in the cloud and then they migrate it out to the location for production deployment.
But I think that y'all bring up good points, and one that like JP brought up is not all applications really need to be or should be in the MEC, and that's something sometimes we have to talk with our the folks we're working with to make sure we're having the right fit, right? So
I can tell you, Greg, that's a great point where performance measurement and management is really the only indication they have, unless they actually just put that app out there, go to all that work, orchestrate it, get it out there, and then they get the end human users to test it, and it has a problem, right? So can you get in front of that by having performance management in front of the mech over whatever the network is to start characterizing it? Can you do that faster and become more agile in the software development and the applications?
Yep. Yeah, you want to go in with these things with
Great
eyes
stuff,
wide
guys.
open. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
And anything more to add before we bring it to a close? I love all the cross chatter going here. Anything else to add?
I think one thing, just as a quick note, is anything worth doing. I learned this from a boss of mine many years ago. He said anything worth doing is worth measuring, right? Whether you're shipping products, whether you're building fences, whether you're farming, whether we're building networks, it's worth measuring. So as we talk about the MEC and moving things to improve latency, to have a better experience, we need to measure to make sure we're doing better as we go forward.
So how will we manage workload orchestration?
So first, I think it will be slightly different for private and public MEC. So from a private MEC, typically the service provider will provide APIs to integrate with the application stack, and on the public MEC, the hyperscaler who will provide a similar cloud experience, will provide as part of their solution that that orchestration capability. So if we do go one level deeper, so I think there's multiple level of orchestration required, multiple tier basically. So there's going to be the underlay, which is more the connectivity to the MEC side and provide that agility, I guess, from a connectivity perspective. There's the overlay, the SD-WAN or other VNF that you're going to run, at the MEC side. So typically the service provider, will provide that orchestration through, on our end, it's our NSO, which is the orchestration platform that we're using. And another tier, another layer is going to be the infrastructure. So either, provided by the service provider or the hyperscaler. And then on top of everything, basically the application that, is typically going to be provided by a third party or, simply homegrown by the enterprise. So I think there's definitely a requirement to integrate the full stack, and bring the different layers together. And this is where I think there's an opportunity, and this is, that's absolutely critical. So that the role of, that end-to-end integrator, it's actually quite important. And I think it's going to be a different, player depending on the use case. So the service provider might be that end-to-end integrator for some of the use case, while the enterprise might be the integrator for some other use case, and maybe the third party will integrate things together specific to an application in a vertical, a space. So this is kind of how I see the orchestration.
Yeah, I would have to agree.
Right.
JP, what we're experiencing is that the end users today, especially with private MEC, right? So it's private. They're going to be using their tried and true orchestration tools. A lot of manual function, but they are looking to automation. So when we talk about workload orchestration, we have to talk about how it's going to be automated. Are they going to do Terraform? What tools are they going to use to automate those processes? And I don't know that we, from an Equinix point of view, yet have really got a clear understanding of how the end customers or the end users want to have their applications orchestrated. I think there's a lot of assumptions that are happening in the marketplace today. And to that end, there's a lot of testing to prove that the technology works. And I have a good sense that the technology works. One of the things we've done with one of the hyperscalers is to prove that that OpenShift can be managed from a cloud and put on Equinix's metal. Does that immediately equate to workload orchestration for an end user? Still open to debate, because there's a lot of security stacks, there's a lot of operational domain and things from an administrative perspective and security that we have to take into consideration. So I would agree with everything that JP was just saying.
Yeah, and Jeff, and if I can add to that, this kind of ties back to what we were talking about a bit earlier about, how can humans handle all this performance? We heard the complexity from JP of delivering the service. what if something goes wrong? Where do you start, right? This is where being able to have the proper KPIs, the segmented views, and having that all brought back to the orchestrator so it can decide, right, this is where we need to spend some time, or this part of the chain is not performing. So that was a good explanation, JP, to show the complexity of how this can be sometimes.
Multi-domain orchestration needs a place that it can be put so it can orchestrate all of the things across the full spectrum of what an end user is trying to do. Whether it's a mobile operator, whether it's an enterprise, whether it's a platform or a SaaS company, they need to be able to have a neutral place to do it.
And I would say that MEC is definitely complementary to the other options out there. So it's one solution. So
fantastic, guys! Thank you so much. That is gonna do it. That's a wrap. We really do appreciate you taking the time here to share all of your insights and expertise with us on this deep dive. So thank you, and thank you to everyone watching at home or at your office. More to come.